for me. So hi everyone, warm welcome to another one of our bonus sessions for Gender Networks members. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Jolie from Pregnant and Screwed, and Jolie's going to talk a little bit about the motherhood penalty. So I've long been a fan of Jolie and her work, you know, got the book, got the t-shirt. Is there a t-shirt? There should be. There is a t-shirt, right? We're going to buy a t-shirt. You know, and I think it's really important, as I say, with all of these kind of bonus sessions, that we don't just see what's going on within our communities from a career perspective, but that we understand some of the challenges that are faced by women in the wider society. So as you know, we've done sessions on sexism in society, we've done toxic masculinity, we had menopause a few weeks ago, and this is going to kind of finish off that series for 2021. So Jolie's joined us. She's going to be with you for around 40 minutes, I think, and then we'll have some Q&A. You can post your questions in the Q&A box as you go, and then hopefully we can kind of get to them at the end. So we're going to be talking about why getting pregnant can still be the kiss of death for your career. It's a great way to start Tuesday. So Jolie, I don't know if you want to come off mute, and I will hand over to you. So as I say, ladies and gents, whoever's joined us, get ready with your questions, pop them in the chat box. I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Jolie, but prepared to be shocked. Jolie, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Just give me one sec while I sort out the tech. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Good. Okay. Let me just remove this so we don't get beeping all the way through it. Okay. Here we go.
Now then, children, are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. Once upon a time, there was a talented and ambitious woman who had spent years working so very, very hard to achieve all of her career dreams. Until one day she met a handsome prince, and they decided they would like to start a family. She believed they would live happily ever after, with both of them able to achieve their dreams whilst giving their children all the love and care that they could muster. But when the woman became a mummy, she quickly realised that the whole system was set up to totally screw her.
In the 21st century, women are still being discriminated against simply for becoming pregnant.
Up to 1 in 10 women are finding no option but to leave work.
A survey by Pregnant Then Screwed shows that 71% of women trying to return to work cannot because of childcare.
With me when I came back from maternity, I've been well and truly screwed.
Shying away from this issue.
So can the minister set out exactly what he's going to do to protect and defend those women from redundancy and discrimination in the workplace?
Mothers who are completely burnt out and their mental health is rapidly deteriorating.
And that, children, is why us mothers have had enough. Now then, children.
Sorry. Hello. Sorry about the technical hitch there. I hope that video got your attention. Sorry there was no pick or mix or popcorn to go with it. And I'm sorry if it's left you with a bit of heartburn or latent rage. Dealing with the motherhood penalty requires a capacity to feel comfortable with being uncomfortable. The good news is that together we can fix it and all feel a lot more comfortable, both at work and at home. This conversation is taking place at a key time for all of us. As we move forward into this post-pandemic world of work, we need to ensure that the lessons of COVID are placed at the heart of a movement to craft a 21st century world of work that's fit for purpose, productivity, and above all, people, all people. Today, I'm going to talk about the challenges faced by working mothers and why organisations need to better understand the motherhood penalty. What we're looking at here is a problem that requires significant structural change and practical action. To deal with the motherhood penalty, we need to do more than a bit of tweaking of existing policies and some kind words. It needs a concerted effort. It needs employers to set clear and rigorous deliverables. It's hard work, of course, that goes beyond whatever we're talking about today. So you're all going to have to roll your sleeves up. At this point, some people in the audience are often wondering, just how much of a problem is this really? We've got COVID, we've got Afghanistan, we've got climate change, we've got the space race. Maybe we should just scrap it all and hitch a ride in Jeffrey Bezos's cock rocket to the outer edges of the universe. Or otherwise, they're thinking, how bad can it really be for pregnant women and mothers? Surely everybody cares about them. I know I give my seat up on the tube for pregnant women, and I take my mum out for Mother's Day lunch. I know they're wondering this because they either ask some very odd questions at the end of the presentation, or they're the people who go a bit green when I get to the data. But just to be really clear, let's do some stats to lay the ground. In 2015, the Equality and Human Rights Commission released a report on pregnancy and maternity discrimination that found that 77% of working mums encounter negative or discriminatory treatment in the workplace, and 54,000 women a year lose their jobs for daring to procreate. 54,000 women being pushed out of their job every year. That's a woman every 10 minutes in the UK. 1 in 9 pregnant women losing her job for getting pregnant. It's now nearly 7 years since that last report, 2 of which have been spent in a pandemic that has widened inequalities and forced vast amounts of unpaid and low-paid care onto women. But before we get to all that, let me start by telling you a bit about me as an introduction to what it looks like when it all goes horribly wrong. In 2013, I was working on a year-long project for a children's charity in the Northeast. It was a project that I had designed and I'd secured all the funding for it, and I was dead excited because it was going to directly benefit some brilliant young people in a region that's often forgotten about. I was university educated, confident, and ambitious. Not to toot my own horn too much, but I was the kind of energetic, socially conscious, and imaginative young person that employers need. But in 2013, I was also pregnant. And in becoming pregnant, I somehow crossed the line from usefulness to liability. 8 years later, I still don't have an explanation from my employers, but essentially I informed my boss that I was pregnant at 4 months and suggested a call to talk through the arrangements. And the next day, the CEO fired me by voicemail. So there I was. I had rent and bills to pay, and I was about to have a baby. And I had no idea where my next paycheck would come from. Not working meant that I wouldn't even qualify for measly statutory maternity pay of £151 a week. An employment lawyer agreed that I had a strong case for discrimination, and they wrote a letter to my employer demanding they compensate me for lost earnings. That letter cost me £250. My employer just threw that letter in the bin. They didn't even grace it with a response. So then my only option left was to take my employer to tribunal. When I asked how much that would cost, I was told it would be about £9,000. £9,000. Who has that sort of money? I certainly didn't. I barely had the £250 for the letter. And that was it. And actually, that really was it, because it turned out that the stress of the situation was really bad for my baby, my pregnancy, and me. And as you only have 3 months to raise a tribunal claim from the point that discrimination occurs, I couldn't wait until my baby was born safely before I started proceedings. So I was forced to drop the case. We know from the data that pregnant women and new mothers are often the first to be pushed out of their jobs when a business is making cuts or bracing for a difficult working environment. Research has shown that pregnant women and new mothers are viewed as distracted and uncommitted to their job. Not that we needed the research to prove this, because I have the testimonies. And here are some examples of those horrific real life stories that have been shared with me over the years. I have heard from at least 100 women who said their boss told them they better get an abortion if they want to keep their job. I heard from one woman who was forced by her employer to do a shot of vodka every morning to prove she wasn't pregnant. Then there was the woman who had hyperemesis, the type of morning sickness that can make you so violently unwell you can end up in hospital on a drip. So she was going to the bathroom 7 times a day to vomit. Her boss clearly thought she was skiving, so he demanded she vomit in a bin next to his desk in an open plan office of 60 people. Another woman had worked for the same employer for 6 years. She was performing really well. Her boss told her she deserved a promotion. She had to go for an interview, but it was just a formality. The job was in the bag. Before the interview, she informed her boss that she was pregnant. She didn't get the job. And when she asked her boss why, he said he had discussed things with his wife and they had decided that her priorities would change. At Pregnant Then Screwed, we ran a survey in September this year of 20,000 parents, which found that 84% of mothers believe childcare has affected both their earnings and their seniority at work. A separate survey showed that employers see mothers as such a burden to their business that a third avoid hiring women of childbearing age, and more than half say that there is resentment within their company towards pregnant women or those who take maternity leave. So then, we know it's a problem. The next question is often, why don't we know more about it? And there are 2 simple reasons for that. The first is that if you want to bring a claim against your employer, you have 3 months. Yes, even if you're pregnant or raising a tiny baby. The law says you have 3 months to raise a tribunal claim from the point discrimination occurs. In my own situation, I couldn't wait until my baby was born before I started proceedings. But the stress of doing it, the potential cost when I had no income, and the impact on my health and that of my baby son, who was at risk of being born very prematurely, meant I had to drop the case. To think about it more broadly, if women on average tell their bosses they are pregnant at around the 3 to 4 month mark, then if they are fired or mistreated, they are forced to have to fight this during the last few months of their pregnancy. And as Nora Ephron put it, if pregnancy were a book, they would cut the last 2 chapters. It's not a fun time, even before the stress of facing unemployment and bad office behaviour. I've heard so many stories from women in the same situations. Women who are fighters, but who look at the mounting fees, the prospect of having their character picked over and accusations thrown, who are navigating this with a tiny person inside or outside of them, but wholly dependent and very fragile. Wow. The law doesn't give any wiggle room to the realities of life as a pregnant woman or new mother who is being discriminated against. You could say that the law entirely fails to incorporate the lived experience of the woman who is being discriminated against in the protections it pretends to offer her. According to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, just 1% of women who experience discrimination raise a tribunal claim, just 1%. The second reason that we don't hear more about this is because hundreds of thousands of women are silenced every year from talking about what happened to them. I discovered this when I first set up my website. It was a WordPress page that I taught myself through my furious haze to create while breastfeeding my tiny son and changing his hot mustardy nappies. I set up a page for women to share their stories and raise the roof with their righteous anger, thinking if people just knew, we could stop all of this. And I pressed the publish button and I waited and waited and nothing happened. Absolute radio silence. Sorry, I've skipped through a few slides. That is when I discovered the colossal stifling power of the non-disclosure agreement. That's right. It's not just the Harvey Weinsteins of this world who are using silencing papers to hide their bad behavior at work. As I'm sure most of you know, NDAs form part of a settlement agreement between employers and employees. It's a legal contract intended to protect trade secrets and intellectual property, but is now commonly used to hide wrongdoing. Alongside a lump sum of money, it's often presented as a confidentiality clause that hides an employer's bad behavior from the press, from customers, from colleagues, and from future hires. And believe me, the behavior is bad. We don't know how commonly NDAs are used because by their very nature, they're not disclosed to anyone. But what we do know is that they are used in politics because figures show that the House of Commons spent more than £2.4 million forcing people to keep their mouths shut over the past 5 years. We know they are used regularly in UK universities because figures show that around £87 million was spent on payoffs attached to NDAs between January 2017 and April 2019. And we also know that charities aren't averse to using them either. Figures show that the Alzheimer's Society has spent £750,000 on NDAs. Mothers are also vulnerable because they are struggling with the indirect discrimination of being reliant in the UK on one of the world's most expensive, dysfunctional childcare systems. We have the second most expensive childcare system in the world. A third of parents say that their childcare costs are more than their mortgage or rent. And according to Save the Children, in 2018, there were 870,000 stay-at-home mums who wanted to work but couldn't because of childcare costs or availability. We know that by the time a woman's first child is 12 years old, her hourly pay rate is 33% behind a man's. Not because they are not talented enough, not because these women don't want to work, but because of the hundreds of barriers that women headbutt when trying to have a child and a career. So all of the information I've given you so far outlines how bad the situation was before the pandemic hit. And clearly things weren't great before, and they got dramatically worse almost overnight. When the schools and childcare facilities closed in the first stage of the pandemic, all of the data showed that it was women who were hoovering up the majority of the extra unpaid work, both literally and metaphorically. Data from the Institute of Fiscal Studies showed that the only time the unpaid work was shared equally between a mother and a father was when the mother was still doing her paid job and the father had been furloughed. The same research also showed that for every hour of uninterrupted paid work done by mothers, fathers were doing 3 hours of uninterrupted paid work. And a report published by PricewaterhouseCoopers stated that this second shift was adding 31 hours per week of unpaid work onto women during the pandemic. This unequal share of the domestic load has played out in a variety of ways, namely in terms of women losing their jobs or being forced to reduce their income, but most importantly, it's had a severe impact on the mental health of many mothers. At this point, I'm going to play you a recording of some voicemails left on the Pregnant Then Screwed scream or shout line during the pandemic. This was a voicemail service we set up so that mothers could have an opportunity to say exactly how they were feeling during the pandemic, as we felt that no one was really capturing the experiences of mothers whose mental health was rapidly unraveling. But I have to tell you that this is really hard to listen to. So if you're feeling at all fragile today, then you might want to turn the sound down for the next 2.5 minutes.
You've reached the PTS SOS line. This is the Pregnant Then Screwed scream or shout line. This is your chance to rant, rave, scream or shout about your experiences as a mum during the pandemic. Let rip and tell us what this year has really been like for mums.
I have hit my mummy limit. I told my 5-year-old tonight, I am done with being a mummy for today. Please, please, please make this stop. I just can't keep going. This has been, it's been relentless. Every single one of us, pregnant or new mums, have been absolutely and utterly failed. We told him he couldn't go to school that day. And I literally saw the moment that his trust in us shattered. He ran away from us and buried himself in bed sobbing, just as he'd seen me do on the kitchen floor. You get to spend lots of time with them, though, don't you? That's really magical. Fuck you. Fuck off. Of course, our children are magical and wonderful, but also they're caged up animals and they're not their usual selves. Mom, 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 mom. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. He says, Mommy, that's been more than a minute. He wants my attention and I have to do my bloody job and I have to do everything. This is just not possible. Had enough of going to grocery scans, had enough of going to consultant appointments, having enough of having reduced movements with my baby and being worried sick and going into the day assessment unit and having to go on my own. It's not good enough. It's depressing and frightening, to be honest. Furious, angry, confused, upset. I'm at a loss financially, yet I raise these tiny humans and do my job on the minimal amount of support. No, I'm sorry. Mummy is done. Absolutely done.
You reached the PTS. You've reached...
Sorry for the slide issue. It's hard to listen to, isn't it? The thing is that the needs of mothers were forgotten about repeatedly by the government during the pandemic. Firstly, the fact that you had women scooping up all of this additional labour without any mandatory support from the government, support that existed in other countries, including Germany and Portugal. The furlough scheme could be used for childcare reasons, but 71% of mothers who requested to be furloughed had that request rejected, forcing them to choose between their child's well-being and their paid work. Their mental health deteriorated as a result, and our research in October last year found that a third of mothers described their mental health as poor. Pretty much every financial scheme that the government issued failed to consider the needs of mothers. The job retention scheme initially forgot to consider that if you were paid 80% of your usual wages, then you may not be entitled to statutory maternity pay, as you may not meet the earnings threshold. The Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, or SEISS, as it's sometimes referred to, which was basically the furlough programme for the self-employed, discriminated against new mothers in the way it was calculated. If you had taken a period of maternity leave in the last 3 years, then you would receive a payment that was much less than your childless counterparts or your male colleagues. When the scheme was announced, women told the Chancellor straight away that this was discrimination, but it fell on deaf ears. In May 2020, we asked Ellie Reeves MP to ask a question directly to Rishi Sunak in Parliament, and this is what happened.
That regard, but I will of course continue to keep all things, and including that scheme, under review.
Go over to Ellie Reeves. Ellie Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Women that are eligible for the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme but have taken a period of maternity leave since 2016 could receive up to 1/3 less financial support. This discriminates against women on lower incomes in particular, penalises families with young people, young children, and exacerbates the gender pay gap. Will the Chancellor therefore exempt periods of maternity leave from the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme calculations?
Chancellor. Mr. Speaker, for all sorts of reasons, people have up and downs and variation in their earnings, whether through maternity, ill health, or others. What we have done to deal with this is to provide an average of income over up to 3 years on a look-back basis to smooth all those ups and downs in all people's incomes. It was something that at the beginning stakeholder groups were keen to see. It's something we delivered, and I believe provides the fairest way to treat everybody on a level playing field for whatever their circumstances. A 3 years averaging of their earnings, to me, seems a very reasonable approach to take.
Felicity Buchan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That regard, but I will of course continue to keep all things, and including that scheme, under review.
Go over to Ellie Reeves.
Dear, sorry, I really don't know what's going on with my presentations today. As you can hear, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, the man who controls the public purse, believes that maternity leave is the same as sick leave. In the government's response to our initial legal letters, they went further and said maternity leave was the same as taking a holiday. I don't know about you, but if my holiday looked like maternity leave, I would want my money back. That sent out a very clear message, not just to policymakers, but to employers, service providers, everyone. We had to take the government to court to prove that this was discrimination. And 18 months later, we proved in the Court of Appeal that it's not okay to compare maternity leave to sick leave, and that the way this scheme was calculated was in fact discrimination, sex discrimination. Women were failed by the government's inadequate planning and their inability to see caring as valuable to society. The government also forgot pregnant women in their health and safety at work planning. It took them 9 months to publish any specific safety guidance for pregnant women in the workplace. 9 months. despite pregnant women being more vulnerable to the effects of COVID-19. Our phone lines were ringing off the hook with frantic pregnant mothers who had no idea whether they were meant to go to work, and if they did go to work, what their legal rights were if their employer forced them to work in environments where they could become infected with the disease. And this left thousands of women to choose between the health of their unborn child or their livelihood, while others, such as Mary Ajiepong, 28-year-old pregnant nurse, and Becky Regan, 29-year-old pregnant healthcare assistant, tragically lost their lives. Meanwhile, childcare providers are on their knees because of choices the government made during the pandemic. Instead of supporting this vital infrastructure, our government cut funding to the childcare sector in December 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic, resulting in a net loss of almost 3,000 childcare providers between January to July of this year. What was evident to most of us was how few women there were in government who were making decisions during the pandemic. Where were all the women? A Freedom of Information request revealed that during the SAGE meetings, gender wasn't mentioned once. The War Cabinet, set up by Boris Johnson to make fast decisions during the pandemic, didn't contain a single woman, and the daily ministerial briefings to the nation were led by 11 men on rotation, while only one woman, Priti Patel, was given the podium. Okay, so let's talk about why all of this is not just bad for women, but it's catastrophic for business. Firstly, you may have noticed there's a bit of a skills shortage going on. And according to the Open University, it's costing organisations £6.3 billion. When the media cover this issue, I find it absolutely astounding that everyone seems to forget there are at least 870,000 stay-at-home mums who want to work desperately, but can't because of childcare costs. There's some skills right there, right under our noses, if we could just make the labour market work for those women. I'm sure everyone listening to this call is aware that the main purchasers of company products are women. Women drive 70 to 80% of all consumer purchasing decisions. Women make the decision or influence the purchase of 92% of holidays, 65% of cars, 93% of food, 91% of homes, and 61% of PCs. In short, companies need women in order to make profits. And in order to make things that women like and want to buy, companies need to have an understanding of that client base. So they need women working for them. This is not rocket science. Time and time again, research has found that the more women a company has, the more profitable it is. There's also the profit you lose if you fire a woman in whom you have invested. The Equality and Human Rights Commission estimated that the cost to UK business per year of kicking women out of their jobs is £278.8 million, based on recruitment and training costs, as well as lost productivity. That doesn't include the cost if they take you to tribunal because you've kicked them out for daring to procreate. Furthermore, I'm here to tell you that women, and more specifically mothers, represent some of the best talent that you can get. There's obviously the different lived experience and different perspective, but there's also the particular skill set and productivity that comes with motherhood. In 2014, A study by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis found that women with 2 children are the most productive people that you can hire. It found that over the course of a 30-year career, mothers outperform women without children at almost every stage of the game. Additionally, researchers from Clark University found that parents perform better in the office because they've learned to multitask, handle stress, and negotiate. Microsoft also did some research on their employees and found that almost 2/3 of working mothers believe they've become better at doing more than one thing at a time since having kids. You don't say. If you want someone who is good at teamwork, multitasking, project planning and management, someone who is patient and has emotional intelligence, well, motherhood is pretty much the best training course for management that you can ask for. To round off this talk, here are my conclusions on what needs to change and what we can all do to move that change forward. We need an affordable, good quality childcare system. It's not just about fairness and equality, it's about economic resilience and economic growth. If large swathes of our population simply can't get to work because the social infrastructure isn't there, that has a big knock-on effect in terms of the talent gap, a tax revenue gap, a higher welfare bill, and an increasing number of people living in or near poverty. Not investing in childcare is sexism. The Women's Budget Group has found that investing in care creates 2.7 times as many jobs as investing in construction. Yet, sorry about that slide, when Boris Johnson talked about how we rebuild our economy, he did so in front of a sign that said, "Build, build, build," surrounded by hard hats and high-vis jackets. There is a huge opportunity here for companies in the absence of any real government action on this issue. If you provide on-site childcare or subsidise the childcare of your employees, you will put yourselves head and shoulders above your competitors when recruiting. And studies show it also improves the retention of your staff. We have to establish equality at home if we are to have equality in the workplace. And that means creating a shared parental leave system that actually works. Our current system is used by 2% of families when 85% of dads say they would do anything to spend more time with their children. Other countries have shown that if you ring-fence paternity leave so that it can only be used by the dad or other parent and pay it at a decent percentage of their salary, then men will take time out of the workforce in their droves. The more time dads take out in those early days, the more mothers earn over their lifetime. Some studies have shown that for every week of paternity leave dads take, a mother's salary increases by 6%. Kids do better in the education system if dads spend more time with them in their early days. And one of my favorite facts is that couples are 40% more likely to stay together if dads spend time on their own with their children in their first year of life. But when dads ask for flexible working or ask to take parental leave, they're often met with bemusement. Why on earth would you want to spend time with your own offspring? I've heard stories from men who told their boss they wanted to take shared parental leave, and one said, "Oh, right, so you're going to be playing mum for 3 months, are you? Shall I buy you a dress while you're at it?" And another told me he'd been up for promotion, but his boss said unless he changed his request for shared parental leave, his promotion would be rejected. Another told me his boss would email him when he was on shared parental leave and start the email, "Hello, nanny." So employers, ask what your mums and dads need. Work alongside your parent employees to find out what kind of support they need to use their skills and how to transition in and out around maternity and paternity leave. Think about mentor schemes among women so that women who've been through it can support women going through it. Think about reverse mentor schemes so that men who don't get it can work alongside women experiencing it. Next, we have to deal with the pernicious culture in this country of presenteeism. The notion that if we are sitting at our desks for a really long time, then we clearly must be working really, really hard, when the reality is that the US Bureau of Labor says we are only productive for 2 hours and 53 minutes a day. In 2019, the UK was crowned the unpaid overtime capital of Europe, and mothers simply cannot compete in that environment because we've got too much unpaid labour to do. We need to be available to pick our kids up from school or nursery or whatever fragile arrangements we depend upon. Working long hours, or rather being present at work for long hours, decreases your productivity. And we have a real issue with productivity in this country. It's something that should be keeping ministers awake at night. I have heard from women who were slow clapped out of the office for leaving work on time, not early, on time to go and collect their children. Instigate the leave loudly approach, invented by PepsiCo CEO Robert Rietbrock. He tells his employers that they must, his executive employees, his senior employees, that they must leave the office on time rather than slipping out of the back door quietly to go and collect their kids. They must make a real song and a dance about it. This normalizes caring, and it ensures everyone in the office knows that presenteeism is not valued in your organization. If you are an employee of an organization, set up a women's group to discuss what's working and what's not working. Lobby as a group. Change happens when women organize as a movement, a bit like what we are doing today, and give a platform to women who feel quite understandably nervous to speak as an individual. Talk about these issues as much as humanly possible because they affect the quality of our lives, the quality of our society, and they are worthy of our deepest attention. Read about this issue in detail and discuss it with family and friends, because you'll be surprised, you'll be really surprised at some of the deeply entrenched biases that they hold, even the ones you least expect. And luckily for you, I've written a book about it, so you can buy that from all good bookshops. Use shared parental leave, and if you're raising sons, ask them what kind of dads they want to be. And finally, and this is a tough one, often the elephant in the room, each and every one of you who is in a straight parenting partnership needs to do everything they can to rebalance the unpaid work in your home, particularly if you have kids. This isn't just about trying to level the playing field right now. It's about modeling equality so that hopefully we can change this for the next generation. And in the words of eminent journalist and author Helen Lewis, there's one great contribution men can make to feminism: pick up a mop. And if you're still stuck, you can hire this brilliant organization that offers training, advice, and support on doing all of this. It's called Pregnant Then Screwed. Thank you.
Jolie, fantastic as ever. I mean, some absolute shockers in there that just make your mouth drop. Obviously, very emotional listening to those women just at the end of their tether, like during the pandemic. And just why everyone's thinking of some questions, like a question for you. Are you still hearing those voices? Because obviously women, there's like, you know, being told to go back to the workplace now, whereas they've carved out routines and stuff like that being at home. And now surely that's exacerbating the problem with them now being told you've got to return to work.
Yeah, I mean, pregnant women, we're really deeply concerned about, because we're still seeing low rates of vaccination uptake in pregnant women, very low rates. Black pregnant women, 5% of Black pregnant women are vaccinated. Overall, it's 22%, but still very low. And of course, they're more likely to become unwell. And there's very little guidance to protect them in the workplace as well. So pregnant women are really scared at the moment. Of course, that's really bad for the baby and it's really bad for the mum, but also with COVID still raging and infection rates rising and rising, we know that mothers are having to still step back from their jobs sometimes to care for kids who are unwell, who have COVID, and also, you know, if they're getting sick themselves or family members are getting sick. So the problem is still there, absolutely still there. And I don't think we've had a chance, those mothers have ever had a chance to recover after what's happened from the pandemic. It's just kind of kept going.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any questions? You can turn your cameras on and ask them actually, rather than use the chat, because then we can record them for everyone else. So anyone else got an opinion on some of this? So Emily, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that talk. It was really, do you know what, I resonated with a lot of it, like all the way through from, you know, the video that you played about all the different mums chiming in. I was like, oh, I've probably been that person at some point, like in the last sort of 8 years of parenting. I just sort of wanted to get your view really on, because I liked what you said about if men want to contribute to feminism, start by picking up a mop. So I put like a little story of mine in the comments, and that is that, I mean, I feel like I'm using this too much as a counselling session, but my half is a good father. He's a good dad. But as much as he believes in fairness and stuff, I think women I don't know what it is, but we naturally end up taking the lion's share of the childcare, thinking about what are they having for lunch? Have they got washed clothes? Like, it's all the silence or a task that you just sort of silently pick up and get done. And I do think that sort of it impacts on how much we can contribute in the workplace and how much and work-life balance, etc., etc. I was wondering what your view is on how you can even that balance at home. Like, what is your advice? Or do you think women and men need to have better support on how to have sometimes really difficult conversations about, this doesn't feel fair, I feel like I'm doing more, without it becoming a contentious issue and stuff? So I just wanted to know what your view on that was. How do you think women can get better balance on the chores at home, and what support do you think men and women need to be able to do that successfully?
It's a great question. And I don't know a single woman who doesn't have these frustrations, I have to say. But I think firstly what we need to do, we need ring fence properly paid paternity leave, because part of the problem is women have babies and then they take maternity leave. They're out of the workforce for 9 months to a year. So they, you know, babies that arrive with the manual, you figure out how to parent, and you do all that learning on maternity leave. And so when you return back to work, it just falls to you. Women do 60%. They do almost 3 times the caring that men do, and 60% more of the domestic labour. And I think it just sort of entrenches it from the outset, because it's women stepping back from their careers and doing, you know, learning how to do that, look after the kids. So that's structurally what we need to change. In terms of how you can change things now, I wrote a few tips in the book, but what I have found really helpful actually is there's this great app called Our Home. and it gamifies the domestic labor. And my partner is the most competitive human you could ever meet. And so because it gives you points every time you complete a task, he would start doing more of the domestic labor because he wanted to win. So he would, at the end of each day, get his app up and go, look, I'm on 80 points. You're only on 70 points. Little did he realize I was laughing, secretly in a corner, thinking I've managed to find a way to get him to do loads of housework. So I would definitely try listing out all of the tasks that need doing during a week. All of every task, from putting the kids to bed to making the tea to doing the laundry to taking the kids swimming, whatever it is that you're doing, and assign it at the beginning of the week so that it feels like you're sharing stuff better and it's really transparent and open. But also, I think it's really important for dads to realize how good it is for kids to see things properly shared rather than to see these gender divisions of labor. And there's loads of research that shows that if you share the domestic labor properly in the home, that it has massive benefits for girls in particular. They have more egalitarian relationships, they do better in their careers, and boys will grow up to have more equal relationships as well. So I think having that conversation with your partner about how good this is for the kids rather than it being, why are you not doing that, I think helps too.
And just on that note, there is some, you guys know that we've done some sessions with Elliot Ray that recently wrote the book Dad, and he's been doing lots of workshops with men in a kind of way to ensure that they do that lion share as well. So that's something to check out. And there's I think there's a session we had with Elliot that's on the portal, so you can have a look at that. So I'm going to come to Sasha. Sasha, you got a question? You're on mute, Sasha. Can't hear you. Here we go. You're on mute. Sasha, you're still on mute. Maybe you just want to type your question in the chat box. That we can see. Settings won't allow me. Okay, I'm not sure why that is, to unmute. Might be a session her end. Sasha, type your question in the chat box and we'll go to Jackie while you're typing that in. So Jackie, can you unmute? Fantastic. So. Yeah, go ahead.
For me, it's the childcare issue. So I'm originally from Germany. I put in the chat, I was raised by a single mother who in this country, she would not have been able to go to work, which means I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I've had and the example that's being set. So my question is more, what can we do to actually lobby government to change this? I mean, there's such a huge problem, and I think it's shown in Germany. Like, one of my friends was forced, she was an auditor and she wanted to come back after a year, and they were like, no, you need to take at least 18 months of leave. Like, that was the company policy. It makes women much more effective in the workplace if they have that time. They know their job is secure, they know they can come back. So how can we do that? How can we get involved to lobby government is basically my question.
I mean, I could talk about childcare all day. It just, it makes me so angry, our childcare system. We've been campaigning on this for 6 years. There are other organisations that have been campaigning on childcare for decades, and it's just falling on deaf ears. And the real problem is it's getting worse. It's not getting better. And when the Tory government came in and they announced the 30 hours free scheme, which was a vote winner, they did it because it was a vote winner under David Cameron. That we now have proof that they hadn't budgeted for that 30-hour free scheme. They just sort of flung it in there to win the election. And they purposefully then underfunded that scheme in order to deliver it. They underfund it by about £2.10 per hour per child, but they never admitted it. They never said that that's the problem. And so childcare facilities were struggling. They were like, how on earth can we operate this scheme when you're not giving us the money to do it? And so they've had to increase their costs overall for children under the age of 3. So the cost of childcare has just gone through the roof as a result of this scheme being purposefully underfunded. And so we along with other groups have shown repeatedly how this is forcing mothers out of the workforce. And it's not just about the number of mothers that can't work because of childcare costs, it's about the number of women that have to work fewer hours. And there are many women that go part-time in order to be able to afford childcare. And of course, that has an impact on your career, it has an impact on your long-term earnings, has an impact on your pension, all of that sort of stuff. And childcare workers are paid so badly for the job that they do, so appallingly badly. We're hemorrhaging childcare staff. We've barely got any because nobody wants to do the job because it's paid so appallingly badly. 1 in 10 childcare workers live in poverty. So this whole sector is just falling to bits. And without it, you know, we don't have an infrastructure to be able to work. After asking for more money in the childcare sector for the last 6 years and realizing we weren't getting anywhere, we've changed our tactic. And we're now asking for an independent review of the childcare sector because we don't believe ministers have got a grasp of it at all. They don't understand it. They don't understand the issue. They don't understand how to fix it. They don't understand where their money's going. They just don't get it. So we're calling for an independent review so that somebody can come in and look at this problem holistically and make the recommendations required. And that is a bit more effective, that campaign. It seems to be penetrating a bit more. And we've got very senior Tory MPs that are supporting the notion of an independent review now. But of course, these things take time to get through.
And did they compare things like, obviously the Scandi countries do fantastically well on this kind of stuff as well? I mean, we can look to other countries to see where the upfront investment really pays off further down the line.
We've got all of the data, and we know that if you compare childcare in the UK to OECD countries, the amount of money that we contribute to childcare is about a quarter of the average contribution in terms of GDP, if that makes sense. And yes, Sweden, Denmark, Finland all have incredible childcare facilities. And there is data that shows that if you have a childcare facility like that, kids do better in the education system. They have higher well-being. You have more mothers in work. It pays for itself. You know, we know that if you invest in childcare, it pays for itself almost immediately. So why on earth are we not doing it? But as I say, we've been saying this for 6 years and not getting anywhere. So this is why we've changed our tactic. And what I think companies can do, and what we really want to see, is we want to see the voice of employers in this conversation. That's what we're missing. And that's what the Tories listen to more than anybody. If we have big companies get behind our campaign for an independent review who are saying we are losing valuable, brilliant staff because our childcare system is failing the women of this country, we need you to look at this, then they're more likely to pay attention. So as somebody who works in an organisation, that's what we would ask you to do, to lobby your employer.
Thank you.
Just mindful of time, and I know we've got a couple more questions. We have to let Jodie go soon. So I'm going to go back to Sasha, who I think has sorted out her settings. Sasha, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Amazing, thank you. Sorted out, doesn't one. So I think my question is about some of the systematic challenges that are there, and some of them you've mentioned already, and also some of the government policies that I guess don't support mothers and pregnant females. So what can we do as a female community to impact some of the decisions that are being taken that impact our day-to-day lives and our future?
At a government level, what can you do? We would ask you to, support the work that we are doing. We are constantly asking people to take decisive actions. So whether that be writing to your MP, whether it be filling in a petition, whether it be tweeting an MP, all of these things don't sound like much, but they have a massive, massive impact. With our childcare campaign for an independent review, we had 112,000 signatures in 48 hours on that petition. And that's because we mobilized our community. And because we had 112,000 signatures, we then got a Westminster Hall debate. So we got all of the MPs to talk about this issue, and we got a minister that had to respond to it, to give a specific response. You know, these things make a difference. They are really powerful. So follow us on Instagram at Pregnant Then Screwed. That's where we support most of our stuff, and that's where we post most of our stuff, and support what we're doing. That really does help.
Fantastic. Moving on to Catherine.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my question. It's a really quick one, I hope. You mentioned a couple of things that we can do as employers to improve the situation, so such as advocate for leading loudly and presenteeism, and then asking what mum and dads need. Is there anything else that you think from a business point of view we really should be focusing on or really should be prioritising?
I think it's, from a business point of view, the key thing is listening to the women who return to your company after maternity leave, and what they found works and what doesn't work, and documenting everything. It's about data collection, it's about understanding their experiences and trying to find ways to make that experience better. But the other key thing is encouraging the men in your organization to take paternity leave, and making that as simple as possible, and finding a way to reward them for doing it, because at the moment we know it's women that are taking the time out of their careers, it's not men. And so we need companies to step in to encourage the dads to share that labor. And again, the research shows that if dads take paternity leave, your retention improves of dads as well. Lots of dads look for new jobs after men look for new jobs after they become fathers. If you encourage them to spend time with their kids, you give them the flexibility that they need, you'll retain them. You won't lose them.
Amazing, thank you so much.
And I think we've got one more. Katie?
Hi, I just wanted to quickly say I'm originally from Estonia, and in Estonia you get 1 year full pay. This is supported by the government. The kindergartens are super cheap. It's just hundreds of euros a month, but you basically drop your kid off there 5 times a week and they look after it, and they do all sorts of things like arts, music, etc. And what I also find strange in the UK, for example, I don't have kids yet, but I'd like to start a family soon, is that kids go to school at the age of 3 and 4. Why is it not 7 as opposed to in Scandi countries? It's just, kids can play and do whatever they want in kindergarten rather than having to go into this really kind of structured schooling, stressful systems earlier. And actually, in the end of the day, the education isn't necessarily that much better, but just an observation and comparison to some other countries that have a lot of support for families.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of those observations. We have a really ridiculous education system, don't we, where we put all this pressure on our kids that is completely unnecessary if you compare it to other countries. I totally agree.
I agree. Well, that's all we've got time for. Jolie, it's been a fantastic session. Thank you for asking all the questions. I've put some details to all of you in the chat. I mean, this session is for Gender Networks members. I'd love you to think about having a similar session within your organisation. Let's say Jolie does run a charity, so anything that we can give for her time obviously helps her to do our campaigning. So do have a think about that. Do have a think about something, another kind of idea I put further up the chat, even as part of your ERG, if you kind of looked at the new mothers, the expectant mothers, and pulled a smaller event together for them, just to get to the grassroots of how they're feeling and how you could better support them. There's some kind of food for thought there. So Leona will share details of how you can get in contact with Jolie if you want a session in your own company. But it just leaves me to say thank you to all of you for engaging and showing your passion for what is a big societal issue, right? It's not just a women's issue. And a huge thank you to Jolie. We'll always be there to support you, Jolie, whatever you do. Hopefully we can cross your palm with gold so you continue your fantastic work. And when there's next a survey, a petition to the government, and as I said earlier on in the chat, we share quite a lot of those from various organisations, but I will make sure that you all get it so that we can show our support in that way. But there is things like writing to your local MPs and just being aware, just put this kind of maternity discrimination lens on with all the rest that we've given you this year. But thank you, Jolie. Do follow Jolie on Instagram and on social media, and sign up to newsletters and things like that as well. Lovely. Thank you so much. Wishing you a happier rest of your Tuesday. Take care, everyone. Thanks again, Jolie.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.